An investigation by the US state of Minnesota following the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis in 2020 has found that the city's police have engaged in a pattern of race discrimination for at least the last 10 years. Minnesota's Department of Human Rights said its research showed there was a disparity in how officers use force, stopped, searched, and arrested people of color compared to white people in similar circumstances. The reports blame a paramilitary approach to policing and a culture that's ineffective at holding officers accountable for misconduct.
After completing this extensive investigation, the Minnesota Department of Human Rights finds that the city and Minneapolis Police Department engaged in a pattern or practice of race discrimination in violation of the Minnesota Human Rights Act. MPD's data shows that officers are more likely to stop Black community members for longer. They're more likely to search Black community members for their vehicles. They're more likely to cite Black community members, use force against Black community members, and arrest Black community members during a traffic stop. There's some real need for some organizational change. That does not happen overnight. It's not as easy as a policy fix. So we want to make sure we get it done correctly. So as long as it takes to do it right.
Well, for more on this, let's cross live to the U.S. and join our US Correspondent Rotimi Kade. Rotimi, thanks so much for joining us on Newsday. Well, tell us more about this damning report into policing in Minnesota.
Well, the 72-page report essentially x-rayed the activities of police departments in Minnesota in the wake of George Floyd's murder. And what came out of the investigation was not just the obvious, but a very deep-rooted pattern and practice of racial discrimination. The analysis, for instance, found that Black people accounted for 63% of the use of force by police from 2010 to 2020 in the last decade, while the population of African Americans in the city is just 19%. So, but also very disturbing is that there's a known culture of not holding erring officers accountable for their misconducts. And the report also found officers use slurs, racial slurs, disrespectful language, etc. against minorities during their operations.
And as you know, being in the U.S., what has been the reaction to it? Because we know the African Americans have been towing this line for decades and saying the same thing. What is the reaction from the police department and the general public?
Well, at least for the last 24 hours, human rights advocates and civil rights organizations have lauded that report, and in the next few weeks, I think it will begin to catch up with the people, and of course all over the country. But I think essentially this is pointing to the fact that this pattern of racial discrimination is actually real, and for some reason it has been put on a back burner. But right now, I think it's a wake-up call. It will definitely be something that will be discussed in the coming days, months, and also years. And perhaps maybe that will definitely help in readjusting or passing laws that would make police officers to be held accountable going forward.
Now, we saw the global reaction to George Floyd's murder, but has anything actually changed in the U.S. when it comes to policing, and is anything likely to change after this report?
Well, at least for the last 2 years since George Floyd's murder, I've not seen much have actually changed, at least from the local television stations and radio that I follow very dearly. There've been, there seems to be a sort of, increase in the arrest and the killings of Black African Americans in some, smaller and even bigger cities. We've seen high rates of arrest, and if you, even from the international perspective, you definitely see that same, pattern. But we have not actually, gotten to that point where there's a barometer that actually sort of measure, the reason why there's this still high cases of arrest. But I think Congress moved swiftly in 2021 when they passed the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, Justice in Policing Act bill in the House. But when it got to the Senate, obviously it was turned down because of a divided Senate. It needed at least 60 votes, but they couldn't get that. And so on and so forth in terms of even the state houses of Senate, where it is expected that such laudable a bill should be passed, but it has not seen the light of day. So this is going to be a sort of a continuous, pattern, because if nothing is done about it in terms of a law being passed to check police officers, I think we'll continue to see, this sort of things going on for a long time.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and discussing this with us, Rotimi Kade.